The purpose of this meeting is to make student athletes and parents aware of the Bloomer High School Activities Code and the requirements laid out to participate in different activities offered at Bloomer High School. While an attempt is made to cover the most important pieces of the code, this is certainly not an exhaustive presentation, and student athletes are reminded, as are parents, that they are responsible for everything that is in the code and making sure that they ask questions if something is not clear prior to signing the activities code. With that, we'll get started. The purpose of this meeting, as I said, is to discuss the activities offered at BHS, to make sure paperwork and fees are understandable to student athletes and made available, and understand the timeliness with which those need to be turned in. WIA eligibility status is laid out, and so is Bloomer High School eligibility and sanctions associated with different violations. In the code, we have different categories of activities. Athletics falls under category 1, and here they are. In the fall we have girls volleyball, girls tennis, girls cross country, boys cross country and football. In the winter, girls basketball, boys basketball, and wrestling. And in the spring, girls softball, boys baseball, boys golf, girls track, boys track. Here are examples of other activities at BHS that fall into different categories. I'm not going to go through all of these categories. You can read through the code and determine which category a certain activity would fall under when it comes to potential sanctions if need be. There are 6 things that need to be turned in. I'm going to just jump in right now and make sure people are aware that all of this paperwork, in quotes, that we'll be talking about are now online, available at our website. If you go to our district website under the high school tab and go down to activities and athletics, Mrs. Missy Seibel has put together a really cool way for student athletes to register with their parents online, and you can also go through the code online and sign electronically that you have read through the code and understand the code. That would be accepted in lieu of watching this. So after 3 minutes and 15 seconds, if you're ready to move on and do that, you are welcome to. An electronic log would be created, and we would have that information available to us that you did watch the code meeting, in quotes, watch it online. But here are the other things that we need. You cannot practice without these things. Physical or an alternate year card. The April 1st parenthetical addition there is just to remind students and parents that if you had your physical after April 1st of 2017, you are good for this year and next year. You would just need an alternate year card. If your physical was prior to April 1st, so let's say your physical last year, you had a physical on March 31st, that physical would clear you for the 2016-17 year, and then you would use an alternate year card for this year, and then you would need to have a physical again before competing in activities in the 18-19 year. You also need a $50 participation fee per student per activity. We talked about the signed activities code. You also need to sign the WIA Athletic Eligibility Bulletin, fill in the athletic emergency form, and also parent-athlete concussion information. All of this, with the exception of the WIA Eligibility Bulletin, I believe, are available online. So you can fill all of this information out online if you would rather. There's a lot in terms of being an eligible student athlete in the eyes of the WIAA. Here are a couple of high points relative to eligibility and transfer. First of all, you cannot be 19 before August 1st. And if you are ineligible to participate in varsity athletics. Also, if you transfer after 4 semesters, in the WIAA's eyes, they go by semesters. We're a trimester school, so for us, what that means is after basically 2 calendar years, if you transfer to another school without a full change of residence, so you just want to go to a different school and you go through the open enrollment procedure to do that, you are ineligible to compete in varsity athletics for 1 calendar year. Academic requirements for BHS to participate. We'll separate here between winter and spring sports and then come back to fall sports in terms of ineligibility. If you have a trimester F for your class at the end of the grading period, at the end of the trimester, at the end of first trimester, at the end of second trimester, if you have an F, you are ineligible for 15 scheduled school days and nights. Okay, not calendar days, those would be school days. So factoring in any days off, whether they're scheduled or not scheduled, it's 15 scheduled school days and nights. And then you regain your eligibility if you're passing after those 15 days. Academic requirements for fall sports. So if you are an incoming freshman, this does not apply to you. You have a clean slate coming from the middle school, so if you had an F in your 3rd trimester at the middle school, you are not ineligible in our eyes to participate. However, if you are a sophomore, junior, or senior, and you had an F in a 3rd trimester class at BHS last year, you would be ineligible for 21 calendar days, okay, not school days, 21 calendar days, or 1/3 of the maximum contests in your sport, whichever is greater. So 1/3 of the maximum contests in football, for instance, would be 3 contests. Attendance requirements laid out for athletes relative to attending school. You need to be in school for a minimum of half a day on game day. We do have certain instances where kids are maybe coming off an illness, where, in the eyes of their parents, they deem it necessary for them to have a little bit more rest and stay home in the morning and then come to school after lunch. We tell those kids that they are eligible to participate that night. However, kind of the general rule of thumb that we go by is if you're too sick to attend class, you're too sick to compete. So we'd rather have you get healthy and be able to be out there with your teammates when you are healthy. We do provide transportation at Bloomer High School, and we expect student athletes to use it. There are certain instances where, due to family plans, family travel, for instance, we may see situations where student athletes would not ride the bus home. In those instances, those exceptions need administrative approval. You can go on the district website and download a release form, a travel release form, or pick one up in the office. As a coach, I prefer not to have this be the default, the norm. I think that it's important for student athletes to be with their team on the way to competition and on the way home. However, I do understand that there are situations that arise, and we support that decision that parents would make to have their child go home with them after an event. We just ask that it's done the right way, and student athletes turn those forms in before the day of competition. Moving on to some sanctions that are connected to inappropriate behavior. Unfortunately, that does happen sometimes, and we have consequences laid out for different situations. I'm going to read this. This is from page 11 and 12 of the Activities Code. Behaviors that are contrary to healthy involvement, good citizenship, ethical considerations, school rules, or violations of the law will subject the participant to loss of participation in activities. All violations will be enforceable for the student-athlete's career on a year-round basis. Any information or evidence considered to be relevant, valid, and accurate by any person or persons reviewing a particular alleged violation shall be considered. Parties who provide information relative to violations will be asked to provide specific names, dates, times, and infractions, but may remain anonymous to the public. If hearsay evidence cannot be substantiated on the basis of subsequent investigation, it will be treated as rumor. I want to touch on the last part of this little paragraph, starting with parties who, this part right here. Now this has created some questions in the past. Parties who provide information relative to violations will be asked to provide specific names, etc., but may remain anonymous. Just so people are aware, I don't take anonymous information. The administration does not take anonymous information and then make decisions based on that anonymous information. However, we will allow people to come in and bring us information, and once we go through an investigative process and deem that the information is indeed valid, we allow that person who brought us that information to remain anonymous, so as to not create situations for that person that are unnecessarily uncomfortable for him or her. So, code violations and sanctions. There are 4 categories of participation. We laid out those categories earlier. We are going to go through example category 1, athletics, is going to be the example that we talk about right now. You can refer to the code for other categories. So, code violation relative to alcohol, tobacco, and or other drugs. Okay, the key word here is attend. If a student athlete attends an illegal party without leaving immediately, that's a violation of the code. So, for instance, if you arrive at a party, if a student athlete arrives at a party or a gathering and sees that illegal activity is going on, okay, that it's an underage drinking party, for instance, where kids have gathered to consume alcohol, the student athlete who arrives needs to make an immediate attempt to leave the premises. You can't sit down and hang out for a half hour, an hour, and then say, hey, I'm going to get out of here. You need to, once you recognize that this is an illegal gathering, make the decision to leave the premises immediately. We say make the decision because if you're a student who doesn't have a mode of transportation, we don't expect you, if this is in the winter, to walk, in 5 miles in the snow, but we do expect you to make an attempt to leave. So that means you're reaching out to somebody, you text somebody, you call somebody, and ask them to help you get out of there. And then once you do that on your phone, then we would have a record of you trying to make that attempt. And through the investigative process, the administration would determine whether or not that constitutes an immediate attempt. We would have conversations about that with the student athlete to determine the appropriate reaction. So along with attending a party, possession, purchase, sale, or consumption of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs also is a violation. Another violation deals with conduct. If there's unacceptable conduct relative to district standards, that's laid out in the code. You can read that in more depth. And this could be a civil or criminal violation of the law. You get a speeding ticket, you're not going to be, we wouldn't consider that to be a code violation. However, if you're on school property and let's say you're driving extremely recklessly and putting other people at harm, and we deem that that is unacceptable conduct relative to the district's standards, that could constitute a violation of the code. Here are the sanctions associated with different violations. on your first offense, it's 25% of the maximum number of events in your season. So using fall sports, we just talked about